The lights overhead pulsed and swirled as I gripped the edge of my desk. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. My heart hammered against my ribs like it wanted to escape, and each breath felt like sucking air through a straw. Black spots danced in my vision as coworkers' faces swam before me. Astrid, are you okay? Someone touched my shoulder, but their voice sounded miles away. I tried to stand, to reassure them I was fine, but my legs betrayed me. The room tilted sideways as I crashed to the floor, knocking over stacks of purchase orders I'd stayed until midnight organizing. Papers scattered like frightened birds. The last thing I remembered was someone shouting for help as my body convulsed. I woke briefly in the ambulance, oxygen mask fogging with each shallow breath. The paramedic hovered above me, pressing buttons on equipment I couldn't identify. "We've contacted your emergency contact," she said. "Your boss, Mr. Preston." Through the haze of pain, I heard the radio crackle. The dispatcher's voice came through. "I have Mr. Preston on the line regarding employee Astrid Werner. Mr. Preston, your employee has suffered what appears to be a severe stress-induced collapse. We're transporting her to Memorial Hospital. As her emergency contact, we need... God..." His voice cut through, clear and cold. "She's just replaceable. Let her handle it." A pause. "I'm not paying for this." The paramedic's expression shifted from professional concern to personal disgust. She clicked off the radio and squeezed my hand, but I was already drifting back into darkness, those words burning into my brain. Replaceable. After 6 years of building his business from a struggling shop into the most successful kitchen supply company in 3 counties, replaceable. After canceling my mother's 70th birthday celebration to cover when his wife had insisted he attend their anniversary cruise, replaceable. After creating the custom kitchen design service that had tripled our revenue and made his name known to every restaurant owner within 100 miles, the hospital ceiling came into focus 3 hours later. The doctor's diagnosis hammered the final nail in my professional coffin: severe exhaustion, dangerously elevated blood pressure, and acute anxiety. "Your body is shutting down," she warned, writing on her clipboard. 2 weeks minimum recovery or you risk permanent damage. As they wheeled me to a room for overnight observation, I spotted Preston standing at the nurse's station, not checking on me, signing papers, refusing financial responsibility. When his eyes met mine, he simply turned away and walked toward the exit. I had no idea then that this moment of abandonment was just the beginning. I couldn't have known that in 14 days, I would return to find my entire life's work stolen, my position eliminated, and my future destroyed by the man I'd helped make rich. And I certainly had no way of knowing how completely I would dismantle everything he loved in return. If this story sounds familiar to you, if you've ever been tossed aside despite your dedication, then you understand this pain. Show support by hitting like, leave a comment about your experience with workplace betrayal, and subscribe to hear more stories of justice served. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. My name is Astrid Werner. Until that collapse, I was the general manager and chief buyer for Preston's Kitchen Emporium. Not the most glamorous title, but I'd built it into something that made me proud. I started as a part-time sales associate during college, studying business management while learning every aspect of commercial kitchen supply. By 24, I was running daily operations. By 27, I'd completely transformed a failing business into the premier culinary outfitter in the region. Preston had inherited the shop from his father, a man who'd built real relationships with local chefs. But Preston lacked both his father's charm and knowledge. What he did have was me, someone who lived and breathed kitchenware, who could explain the difference between German and Japanese steel to professional chefs, who remembered every restaurant owner's children's names and what grade they were in. I wasn't just a manager. I was the heart, brain, and soul of that business. My apartment was filled with cooking magazines and supplier catalogs. My phone constantly buzzed with texts from chefs asking for recommendations. I attended every food industry event, cultivating relationships that brought in exclusive contracts. I'd even learned enough Spanish to communicate with the back-of-house staff at our restaurant clients. My social life? Non-existent. Dating? A distant memory. Family events? Missed more often than attended. But I believed in what I was building. Preston's role mainly involved appearing at major sales meetings I'd arranged and taking credit for my innovations. He'd show up in expensive suits, shake hands, and tell stories about his vision, while I quietly ensured every detail was perfect. I tolerated this arrangement because I loved the work itself and the respect I'd earned within the industry. What made the betrayal so bitter wasn't just his words in the ambulance. It was what awaited me when I returned after my mandatory recovery. The morning I came back, something felt wrong immediately. My parking spot, unofficially mine for years, was occupied by a shiny new sports car. Inside, the store layout had been rearranged, destroying the careful flow I'd designed based on years of sales data. The specialty knife display I'd handcrafted with a local woodworker was gone, replaced by a garish prefabricated stand. When I reached my office, the door was open. The nameplate reading A. Werner, General Manager, had vanished. Inside sat a young man in his mid-20s, feet propped on my desk, talking loudly on the phone about golf scores. "Excuse me," I said, standing in the doorway with my return-to-work note clutched in my hand. He looked up, annoyed at the interruption. With a dismissive gesture, he covered the phone. "Sales floor is that way. Staff isn't allowed in management offices." Before I could respond, my assistant Tilly appeared, her face a mask of discomfort. She pulled me away from the doorway. "Astrid, I'm so sorry," she whispered, glancing around nervously. "Mr. Preston moved you to inventory. That's Dax. His son." "His son?" I repeated dumbly. "What son?" Preston never mentioned a son. "He's been away at college, or dropping out of colleges, from what I gather. Mr. Preston said you'd be handling inventory count in the basement while you recover." Her eyes wouldn't meet mine. The basement, where we stored excess stock and seasonal items. No windows, harsh lighting, concrete floors that ached after an hour of standing. Where we sent employees who couldn't handle customer interaction. "Where's my desk? My files? My computer?" My voice sounded strange, even to my own ears. "Dax has your computer. Your personal items are in a box by the time clock. Your files." She trailed off, then added in an even quieter voice. "Mr. Preston said most weren't necessary anymore. They're implementing a new system." I found Preston in the stockroom, examining a shipment of copper pans. He looked up as I approached, his expression carefully blank. "Welcome back," he said flatly. "Tilly, explain your new position?" "No," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. She couldn't explain something that makes absolutely no sense. "I built this department. I created the customer relationships. I developed the ordering systems. And you collapsed in front of our biggest restaurant client," he countered. "Proved yourself unreliable. My son needs real-world experience. This arrangement works for everyone. I collapsed because I worked myself to illness for your business." He shrugged, turning back to the copper pans. "Nobody asked you to. The counting room is waiting. We need the German knife shipment inventoried by lunch." As I turned to leave, he added casually, "Oh, and Astrid, the staff knows Dax is in charge now. Don't make this uncomfortable for everyone." The basement counting room was exactly as I'd feared, cold, damp, and isolated. My desk was a metal table with a clipboard. No computer, no phone. Just endless boxes to count, record, and restack. Through the ceiling, I could hear footsteps, conversations, the bell above the door announcing customers. My customers, the people I'd built relationships with for years. By midday, I heard raised voices upstairs. I recognized Chef Anton from the Rustic Table, our biggest restaurant account. His booming voice carried even through the floor. "What do you mean you don't have my order? Astrid confirmed it last month." Dax's smooth, practiced response was too quiet to make out clearly, but Anton's reply wasn't. 3 weeks until opening night, and you're telling me now? Where's Astrid? Put Astrid on the phone." Over the next 2 days, similar scenes played out repeatedly. Regular customers asking for me, confusion over orders, pricing disputes. Through snippets of conversation, I pieced together what was happening. Dax was blaming computer errors and previous management mistakes for his incompetence. On my 3rd day in basement exile, Tilly snuck down during lunch. "It's chaos," she whispered. handing me a sandwich. Dax has no idea what he's doing. He told Mrs. Bianchi that silicone spatulas can't go above 300 degrees. She nearly had a fit too. She's been baking professionally for 30 years. Why is Preston letting this happen? The business will suffer. Tilly glanced nervously at the stairs. There's more. Preston's been coming in early, before anyone arrives. He's in your old office, with the door locked for hours. And Dax is telling everyone there, we're structuring vendor relationships. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something deeper was happening. Preston was many things: arrogant, credit stealing, dismissive, but never stupid about money. He wouldn't risk client relationships unless something else was at stake. My opportunity came the next morning. Assigned to count a shipment of premium Japanese knives, I noticed oddities in the paperwork. The shipping manifest listed 36 8-piece sets, valued at over $300 each, but only 24 sets were in the delivery. I checked previous records. The pattern repeated across multiple high-end shipments, expensive items ordered and supposedly received, but significantly fewer actually in inventory, always with Preston personally signing the delivery confirmation. The pieces clicked into place. The business wasn't struggling because of my absence. It was struggling because inventory was vanishing. And with me relegated to the basement, Preston had eliminated the one person who would have noticed immediately. But why put his unqualified son in charge? The answer came during week 2 of my demotion. I overheard Dax on the phone, his voice echoing down the stairwell. Dad's handling it. Yes, the audit is scheduled. No, nobody knows. Once the business sells, we're clear. They were selling the business, but not before skimming valuable inventory and blaming the resulting problems on mismanagement. With me out of the picture and Dax leaving a trail of customer service disasters, they could justify the declining performance to potential buyers. My heart raced as another realization hit. My collapse had been the perfect opportunity. They'd probably been planning this for months, waiting for the right moment to push me aside. That night, I sat in my small apartment, surrounded by industry magazines and catalogs I'd collected over years. Have resources for a career that had consumed my 20s and now lay in ruins. My phone, once constantly buzzing with client messages, sat silent. In 6 years, I'd missed family gatherings, ended relationships, and postponed my own dreams to build Preston's business. For what? To be discarded like yesterday's trash and blamed for their theft? The breaking point came during our annual kitchen showcase event. Every year, I coordinated a massive demonstration for our top clients, restaurants, culinary schools, catering companies. This year, despite my demotion, I was ordered to prepare all the materials but forbidden from attending. From my basement prison, I listened as Dax butchered my presentation to Granville Hospitality Group, an account worth nearly $200,000 annually. He mixed up orders, promised impossible delivery dates, and actually corrected their executive chef on knife techniques. The meeting ended with the client walking out. As I heard the door slam upstairs, something inside me snapped. The last thread holding together my professional composure broke. I wasn't just angry. I was incandescent with rage. That evening, instead of going home to my empty apartment to stare at the ceiling, I sat in my car and drafted a plan on the back of an old invoice. Not a complaint to labor authorities or a passive-aggressive resignation letter. No, something much more satisfying. The next morning, I arrived early and requested a meeting with both Preston and Dax. They exchanged suspicious glances when I entered the office, my former office. I want to apologize, I said, surprising them both, and offer my expertise to help train Dax properly. Their shock gave way to smug satisfaction. Preston leaned back in his chair, my chair. That's very professional of you, Astrid. We could use your institutional knowledge during this transition period. Dax smirked. I guess I could learn a few supplier names from you. Exactly, I replied with a smile that made my face hurt. Why not extract everything useful from me before discarding me completely? If they caught the bitter edge in my voice, neither showed it. Preston actually laughed, mistaking my comment for self-deprecating humor, rather than the declaration of war it truly was. Starting today, I'll create proper training materials, I continued. I'll share my contact lists, explain our ordering systems, and teach Dax everything about the business. For 3 weeks, I became the model employee. I created detailed guides for each supplier relationship. I introduced Dax to key clients. I documented every process, appearing to transfer 6 years of knowledge. Meanwhile, I meticulously recorded every inventory discrepancy, photographed shipping logs, noted which expensive items arrived but never made it to the sales floor. I scheduled meetings with major suppliers to introduce Dax, deliberately booking overlapping appointments he couldn't possibly handle, all while gathering evidence of their plan to strip the business before selling it. What Preston and Dax didn't realize was that I wasn't just the store manager. I was the person every supplier trusted, every chef respected, and every competitor recognized. I hadn't spent 6 years building Preston's business. I'd spent 6 years building my reputation, and they were about to learn exactly what that was worth. The Regional Restaurant Association's annual meeting, our biggest sales opportunity of the year, was scheduled for Thursday. On Wednesday night, I stayed late, promising to finalize the presentation materials. Preston actually patted my shoulder as he left. "I knew you'd come around, Astrid. Sometimes change is for the best." I waited until his car disappeared from the parking lot before I began. First, I removed every training document I'd created over the past 3 weeks from the shared drive. Then, I disconnected the backup system. I took the presentation materials I'd prepared, along with the custom order forms for our biggest clients. Finally, I opened the supply closet, where we kept promotional materials. Every business card, every brochure, every catalog that featured my direct contact information, I took them all. The next morning, I didn't show up for work. I turned off my phone as it began buzzing with increasingly frantic messages from Preston and Dax. Instead, I drove to the convention center, where the Restaurant Association meeting was being held. But I didn't go to the Preston's Kitchen Emporium booth. I had another destination in mind, one that would change everything. I entered through the service entrance, where caterers and event staff bustled about. Having coordinated our booth for 5 consecutive years, I knew every security guard and event organizer by name. They waved me through without question, another advantage Preston had never bothered to notice. The main exhibition hall buzzed with activity. Culinary professionals in chef whites mingled with restaurant owners and food service directors. These weren't just customers to me. They were people whose businesses I had helped build, whose kitchens I had helped design, whose staff I had trained on proper equipment use. From a distance, I spotted our booth, Preston's Kitchen Emporium, displayed in bold lettering across the backdrop I'd designed last year. Dax stood awkwardly beside it, already tugging at his collar despite the early hour. Preston paced nearby, checking his watch repeatedly, phone pressed to his ear. He was calling me, no doubt, wondering where his presentation materials were. I smiled and turned away. My destination lay elsewhere. 2 hours later, Preston's moment arrived. The association had scheduled him for the coveted mid-morning presentation slot, a 15-minute window to showcase new products to the entire assembled membership. I'd secured this opportunity 6 months earlier, through careful relationship building with the organizers. From my position at the back of the room, I watched Preston approach the podium, confidence plastered across his face. Dax trailed behind him, carrying an empty folder, the one that should have contained my meticulously prepared notes and product specifications. "Good morning, distinguished members," Preston began, his voice booming through the sound system. "Today, we at Preston's Kitchen Emporium are excited to announce our new line of professional-grade," he faltered, glancing at the projection screen behind him. The slideshow hadn't appeared, because it was on my laptop, sitting in my apartment. "Technical difficulties," he muttered. "While we resolve this, let me tell you about our exclusive importing partnership with..." He turned to Dax, who shrugged helplessly. Neither of them knew the names of our Japanese knife suppliers, information I deliberately withheld from my training materials. A chef in the third row raised his hand. "Will you be continuing the custom kitchen design service? We're expanding next month." Preston's smile tightened. "Absolutely. Our design team is restructuring for greater efficiency." "Is Astrid here?" called another voice. "She promised to bring specs for that new ventilation system." "Astrid is pursuing other opportunities," Preston replied smoothly. But my son Dax is now heading our customer relations department and will be happy to assist you. All eyes turned to Dax, who stepped forward with artificial confidence. That's right, and we're, very excited about our new cooking things. The room fell silent. Then came the murmurs. Chefs and restaurant owners exchanged glances. Someone snickered. Chef Anton from the rustic table stood up. What happened to the custom ordering system Astrid promised? Our new location opens in 3 weeks. Dax blinked. I'm not familiar with any custom system, but I'm sure we can, It was finalized last month, Anton interrupted. Astrid showed me the prototype forms herself. Preston stepped in. We're reviewing all systems implemented by previous management. Some were not aligned with our business direction. Previous management? A woman called out. Astrid built your entire business. The room erupted in confused chatter. Preston tried desperately to regain control, but without my presentation materials, without knowledge of the products or client relationships, he floundered. His 15-minute slot dissolved into an embarrassing display of incompetence. That was my cue. I slipped out and made my way to the small conference room I'd reserved that morning. Inside waited the 20 most influential buyers in the region, all personally invited via text messages I'd sent from my private phone. Thank you for coming on such short notice, I said, closing the door behind me. I promised you an exclusive preview, and I intend to deliver. For the next 30 minutes, I presented the most comprehensive analysis of kitchen supply chain challenges the association had ever seen. I detailed supplier relationships, price fluctuations, import considerations, and custom solutions for each business represented in the room. As of today, I concluded, I'm establishing Werner Kitchen Consulting. My focus will be ensuring restaurants like yours receive exactly what you need, when you need it, from reputable suppliers with verifiable inventory. I emphasized that last part pointedly. But aren't you with Preston's? Asked a confused catering director. My position there has recently changed, I replied carefully, which has created an opportunity for me to serve you all more directly, without overhead constraints. I distributed business cards, not Preston's, but my own, printed overnight at a 24-hour shop. Simple, elegant, with my personal contact information. For those interested in discussing specific needs, I've prepared detailed proposals based on our previous conversations. I placed a stack of folders on the table, copies of client information I'd been collecting for years. Information that had never made it into Preston's official files because I'd kept it in my personal notes. By lunchtime, I'd scheduled meetings with 15 major accounts, not as a representative of Preston's Kitchen Emporium, but as an independent consultant who knew their businesses intimately. As I exited the conference room, I nearly collided with Preston himself. His face had turned an alarming shade of red, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the air conditioning. What the hell are you doing? He hissed, grabbing my arm and pulling me aside. Where are the presentation materials? Where's the custom order book? I removed his hand from my arm. I believe those materials fall under my intellectual property. I created them on my personal time, using my personal expertise. You work for me, he spluttered. Worked, I corrected. Past tense. I'm submitting my resignation. Effective immediately. His eyes narrowed. You think you can just walk away? After everything I've done for you? The laugh that escaped me held no humor. Everything you've done for me? Like abandoning me during a medical emergency? Like demoting me after 6 years of dedication? Like putting your unqualified son in my position while you systematically stripped inventory from the business? His face paled. What are you talking about? The missing knife shipments. The copper cookware that never made it to the sales floor. The specialty appliances signed for but never inventoried. Do you think I didn't notice? You're making dangerous accusations, he whispered, looking around nervously. Based on nothing. Based on documentation I've been gathering for weeks, I countered. Every discrepancy, every missing item, every falsified receiving report. Behind him, I spotted Dax approaching, his expression thunderous. Preston held up a hand to stop him. Astrid. Preston's voice turned conciliatory. Let's discuss this privately. I'm sure we can come to an arrangement that benefits everyone. I smiled. I've already made arrangements that benefit me, and all the clients you've been neglecting. Preston's demeanor changed instantly. The mask of reasonableness dropped, revealing the cold calculation beneath. You signed a non-compete agreement when I promoted you to manager, he said quietly. You can't simply take our clients. I reviewed that agreement during my recovery, I replied. It prevents me from working for competing retail establishments within 50 miles. It says nothing about independent consulting. His jaw clenched. No one will work with you. You have no capital, no storefront, no inventory. I have something more valuable: trust and knowledge of what you've been doing with that inventory. Before he could respond, Chef Anton approached, clapping a hand on my shoulder. Astrid, there you are. Your presentation was brilliant. When can you visit our new location to finalize the kitchen layout? I smiled warmly at Anton while Preston stood frozen beside me. I've got an opening tomorrow afternoon. Why don't we discuss it over lunch? As we walked away, I glanced back once. Preston and Dax stood motionless in the bustling convention center, two islands abandoned by the tide of industry relationships that had just shifted irrevocably in my favor. The next 3 weeks passed in a whirlwind. Working from my apartment, I coordinated with suppliers I'd cultivated relationships with over years. Many were already suspicious about inconsistent orders from Preston's and welcomed direct communication with the person they'd always really dealt with anyway. I received a cease and desist letter from Preston's attorney, claiming I'd stolen proprietary information. My reply was simple: documentation of inventory discrepancies spanning 18 months, with an offer to share this information with the appropriate authorities if they pursued legal action. The letter was never mentioned again. Meanwhile, I watched from a distance as Preston's kitchen emporium began its slow collapse. Without my client relationships, without my product knowledge, without my systems, the business floundered. Dax quit after being publicly humiliated by Chef Anton over incorrect equipment specifications for his new restaurant, specifications I had personally designed for the space. But the real satisfaction came 6 weeks after the convention. I was meeting with a restaurant supply manufacturer when my phone buzzed with a news alert: local business owner under investigation for insurance fraud. The article detailed how Preston had been systematically reporting items as damaged or lost to insurance while actually selling them through unauthorized channels. The investigation had begun when several suppliers noticed discrepancies between what they shipped and what appeared on store shelves. What the article didn't mention, what no one knew except me, was who had compiled that initial evidence and anonymously submitted it to both the insurance company and the suppliers. By month 3, I had established Werner Kitchen Consulting in a small office downtown. My client list included nearly every major restaurant and catering service that had previously worked with Preston's. My reputation for honesty and expertise had only grown stronger through the contrast with Preston's public downfall. I received regular updates from Tilly, who now worked as my administrative assistant. Preston's Kitchen Emporium was hemorrhaging money. The restructuring had become a liquidation. The building was listed for sale. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, as I finalized kitchen plans for a new culinary school, my office door opened. Preston stood in the doorway, soaked from the downpour, looking 10 years older than he had 3 months earlier. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice neutral despite the hammering of my heart. He stepped inside, water dripping onto my new carpet. His designer suit had been replaced by casual wear that hung loosely on his frame. "You won," he said simply. "The store closes next week. The legal fees have taken everything else." I set down my pen. "I didn't do this to win, Preston. I did it because you left me no choice." "By promoting my son?" he asked incredulously. "That justified destroying my life's work?" "No. By saying I was just replaceable when I was literally collapsing from overwork. By abandoning me during a medical emergency. By stealing from your own business while blaming others for the consequences." He flinched at each accusation. "The business was failing," he admitted quietly. "I needed the insurance money to keep it afloat until we could sell." Dax's position was meant to be temporary, just long enough to establish him as part of management for the sale. "You could have told me the truth," I said. "After 6 years, you owed me that much." He looked away. "Would you have helped?" I rebuilt that business from nothing once. I could have done it again. We sat in silence as rain pattered against the windows. Finally, he reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. The liquidation company found this in the office safe. It belongs to you. He placed it on my desk and turned to leave. Preston, I called as he reached the door. He paused without turning around. I'm sorry it ended this way. He nodded once, then walked out of my office and my life. The envelope contained a faded photograph from the store's grand reopening 4 years earlier. Preston and I stood before the newly designed showroom, champagne glasses raised in celebration. On the back, in Preston's handwriting, couldn't have done it without you. Too little, too late. As I placed the photograph in my desk drawer, my phone chimed with a notification. Chef Anton's new restaurant had been selected as one of the top 10 openings of the year. The article specifically mentioned the innovative kitchen design, MI Design. Sometimes the most effective revenge isn't about destroying someone else. It's about reclaiming what was always rightfully yours: your value, your expertise, your future. Preston had called me replaceable, but in the end, he was the one who couldn't be replaced, because he'd never actually been essential in the first place. I had been the heart of that business all along. Now I was the heart of my own. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like and share. Your support helps stories like Astrid's reach others who might be facing similar workplace struggles. Have you ever had to rebuild after betrayal? Share your experience in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about resilience, redemption, and the sweet satisfaction of rising from the ashes stronger than before. Pack your desk. You're worthless now. The words sliced into me as Phoebe stood over my cubicle, her diamond bracelet catching the light as she gestured dismissively at my workspace. Every head in the office turned. 20 pairs of eyes witnessed my public execution. But the system launch is next week, I whispered, my voice barely audible even to myself. A system we no longer need you for, she replied, loud enough for everyone to hear. The acquisition is complete. I've been given full control of implementation with a $50 million budget. Your contribution is no longer required. My hands hovered over my keyboard, suddenly foreign objects I couldn't control. Just 30 minutes earlier, the company-wide email had announced our acquisition. Phoebe had been promoted to Chief Integration Officer with a budget that made everyone's eyes widen. Now I understood why she'd been smiling so smugly during the announcement. You have 20 minutes, she added, glancing at her watch. Security will escort you out. As I robotically placed my personal items into a cardboard box, my mind raced through the implications. My rent was due next week. My savings would cover 3 months, maybe 4 if I ate nothing but ramen. The job market was tight, and the 3 years I'd spent building this company's crown jewel, the integration system that had made us an acquisition target, couldn't even be properly listed on my resume because Phoebe had ensured my name appeared. Nowhere in the official documentation. I walked out with my head high, though my legs felt like they might buckle with each step. The security guard, Tom, who'd always greeted me warmly each morning, avoided my eyes as he took my badge. This isn't right, he muttered under his breath. Outside, rain poured down in sheets, soaking through my thin blouse as I waited for a taxi. My coat was still hanging on the back of my chair. I wouldn't go back for it. The taxi driver kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror. Bad day? He asked. I met his eyes, suddenly aware of mascara tracks down my cheeks. The worst, I replied. Or maybe not. Maybe this is just the beginning. I didn't know then how prophetic those words would be. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, hit the like button. If you've ever fantasized about getting even, subscribe now. Because what happens next in this story might just be the most satisfying thing you'll hear all day. My name is Ivy Carter. And until 2 hours ago, I was the lead architect for a tech integration system that transformed customer data into actionable insights. Not the sexiest description, but that system had just made our CEO rich and earned my boss a $50 million budget. I'm 32, single, and until today, I thought I was successful. I'd sacrificed everything for my career, relationships, sleep, even the painting classes I once loved. My apartment had become just a place to crash between coding marathons. My fridge contained nothing but coffee creamer and week-old takeout. Growing up with a single mom who worked 3 jobs taught me one thing. Security comes from making yourself indispensable. So I'd made myself exactly that. Or so I thought. I stumbled into my apartment and dropped the sad box of desk plants and coffee mugs on the floor. A framed photo slid out, the company holiday party from last year. There I was, standing in the background while Phoebe posed center stage with the executive team. Phoebe Blake. My boss for 3 years. A woman who'd once told me we were going places together. I'd believed her. We'd started on the same day. Me as a developer. Her as project manager. I created the systems. She presented them to clients. I stayed late debugging. She networked at happy hours. When she was promoted to director, she brought me with her as her technical lead. We're a team, she'd said. Your brain, my face. I believed her because I wanted to. Because I was more comfortable with code than people. Because presenting to rooms full of executives made my palms sweat and my words tangle. Because Phoebe seemed to genuinely value my work, even if she never quite understood how it functioned. Until she did. 3 months ago, I noticed her asking different questions, taking more detailed notes, requesting access to repositories she'd never cared about before. I thought she was finally taking an interest in the technical side. I was flattered. I pulled my laptop from my bag and opened it on my kitchen counter. My personal laptop, thank goodness. Not my work computer. As it booted up, I poured myself a glass of wine I couldn't afford to waste, but desperately needed. The integration system had been my idea from the start. When our company struggled to differentiate itself, I proposed a solution that would seamlessly connect disparate data sources in real time, something our competitors couldn't do. The executives were skeptical until Phoebe championed it. "Ivy can build this," she had told them confidently. "I'll make sure of it." For 18 months, I barely slept. I built, tested, rebuilt, and refined. When early tests showed promising results, Phoebe began showcasing the system to potential investors. The demos were carefully scripted. I would set everything up, then step aside as Phoebe wowed them with the interface I'd designed. "It's just business," she explained. "They respond better to my presentation style." She wasn't wrong. Phoebe had a way of making people feel both impressed and at ease. Her background in sales had taught her exactly how to read a room. Meanwhile, I preferred the comfort of my code. As the system gained attention, so did Phoebe. Industry magazines featured her as an innovator to watch. At conferences, she was invited to speak about her revolutionary approach. I told myself it didn't matter. We were a team and teams shared credit. What a fool I'd been. I opened my email and stared at the message that had arrived minutes before my termination. "Exciting news, acquisition complete." The CEO thanked everyone for their hard work, especially highlighting Phoebe's visionary leadership in developing the integration system that had caught the buyer's attention. My name appeared nowhere. My phone buzzed. A text from Leo, one of the junior developers. "What happened? Are you okay?" I stared at it, unsure how to respond. Leo had joined 6 months ago. I'd trained him personally, showing him the architecture I'd created, the elegant solutions to complex problems. "I'm fine," I typed back. "Just business." Another message appeared below it. "Phoebe called an emergency meeting. Says there are concerns about the system documentation. Says only she understands how to fix it." My fingers froze over the screen. Documentation. I'd documented everything meticulously. It was my nature. Every function, every variable, every potential edge case. But the documentation lived in a secure repository that only I had full access to. Or so I thought. 2 weeks ago, IT had performed a routine security update that required everyone to reset their passwords. Had Phoebe somehow gained access during that window? I quickly logged into the repository. Everything looked normal, except there was a download history I didn't recognize. Someone had exported the entire documentation library last Friday evening, the night of the company party. The party I'd skipped to complete the final module. A cold sensation washed over me. She'd planned this, waited until the system was complete, the documentation finished, and the acquisition guaranteed. Then she'd taken everything and cut me loose. I was replaceable. Worthless. I closed my laptop and pressed my palms against my eyes. Think, Ivy. Think. That's when I remembered the contract. Not my employment contract. That had been standard boilerplate that gave the company ownership of anything I created. But there had been another document, one I'd insisted on before joining. I pulled open my filing cabinet and dug through folders until I found it. A simple 2-page addendum signed by the previous CEO, by legal, and by me. At the time, it had seemed like standard protection for a cautious newcomer. The company had been small then, eager to hire someone with my skills, willing to accommodate what seemed like a minor request. As I reread it now, my heartbeat quickened. Section 6, Paragraph 4. Any proprietary integration systems developed by the employee shall remain the intellectual property of said employee until formal transfer, which must include 1. A 2-month transition period, and 2. Appropriate compensation for ownership rights, as determined by independent valuation. My hands began to shake, but not from fear. For the first time since hearing Phoebe's cruel dismissal, I felt something else, hope. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through contacts until I found a name I hadn't called in years. Diego Reyes. We'd met at a coding boot camp before I joined the company. He'd gone on to law school instead of tech, specializing in intellectual property. I hesitated, my finger hovering over his name. Was I overreacting? Was this document even valid after all this time? My screen lit up with another message from Leo. Phoebe's freaking out. Something about missing authentication protocols. The demo for the new parent company is bombing. I pressed Diego's number. Hello? A groggy voice answered. Diego? It's Ivy Carter. I need your help with a contract. Right now. There was a pause, then the sound of sheets rustling. Ivy? It's almost midnight. I know. I'm sorry. But this can't wait until morning. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. I added, suddenly aware of how desperate I sounded. Hold on. I heard rustling, then the click of a lamp. What kind of contract are we talking about? An IP ownership addendum I signed when I joined my company. I was just fired without notice after building the system that got us acquired. Send it over, Diego said, his voice sharper now, fully awake. And Ivy? Don't contact your former employer until we talk. I took photos of each page and sent them. Then paced my apartment while waiting for Diego to call back. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. This is fascinating, he said without preamble. Did they give you any severance, transition period, ownership compensation? Nothing. Just 20 minutes to clear out my desk. Diego made a sound between a whistle and a laugh. Then they're in breach of this addendum. It's surprisingly well crafted for something you did yourself. I didn't trust them even then, I admitted. The CEO kept changing terms during negotiations. Smart woman. Especially this clause about the authentication protocols requiring your personal key for any major update or data migration. They literally can't fully implement your system without you. I froze. What did you just say? Section 8? Core authentication protocols require originator verification through secure channels established at system creation. That's you, Ivy. You built in a kill switch. I hadn't thought about that protocol in months. When I designed the system architecture, I'd included several layers of security. The deepest one required my personal verification for major structural changes, a precaution against someone accidentally corrupting the database during implementation. I'd almost removed it before launch, but left it in as an extra safeguard. So, what does this mean? I asked. It means they need you more than you need them. The question is, what do you want? What did I want? Revenge seemed too simple a word for the burning in my chest. I wanted recognition. I wanted justice. I wanted Phoebe to feel what I felt standing in that office while everyone watched my humiliation. I need to think, I said finally. Don't wait too long. Based on what you've told me, they're going to realize their mistake very soon. After hanging up, I opened my laptop again and checked my personal email. 3 new messages from Phoebe in the span of an hour. 8:47 p.m. Need access to authentication protocols ASAP. 9:16 p.m. Call me immediately. Critical system issue. And 9:58 p.m. This is unprofessional, Ivy. The board is asking questions. My finger hovered over the delete button when a new email appeared. Not from Phoebe, but from our CEO, Anthony. Ivy, understand there's been a miscommunication. Please call me directly to discuss your position with the company. Urgent. I closed my laptop without responding. For 3 years, I'd answered every urgent message, canceled weekend plans for critical issues, and sacrificed sleep for company emergencies. Tonight, they could wait. I took a hot shower, letting the water wash away the day's humiliation. As steam filled the bathroom, clarity began to cut through my foggy thoughts. I had leverage. I had time. Most importantly, I had nothing left to lose. My phone buzzed again as I toweled off. A text from Leo. Where are you? Phoebe told everyone you sabotaged the system before leaving. Board members are here past midnight. So that was her play. Blame me for her inability to understand the system she claimed to have built. Classic Phoebe, always finding someone else to take the fall. I texted back, interesting theory. What's actually happening? Migration failed. Authentication errors. Parent company reps looking nervous. I smiled for the first time since being fired. Not sabotage, just careful engineering. They're talking about flying you in tomorrow. Phoebe looks like she's about to explode. I, I didn't respond. Instead, I made myself a cup of tea and stood by my window, looking out at the city lights. My phone continued buzzing with messages I didn't read. For once, I wasn't rushing to solve someone else's problem. Morning came with surprising clarity. I'd slept better than I had in months, despite everything. When I finally checked my phone, I had 17 missed calls and 32 messages. I called Diego first. "They've been contacting me," he said immediately. "Their legal department tracked me down somehow." What did you tell them? That I represent you now, and all communication needs to go through me." He paused. "Ivy, they're desperate. The new parent company is threatening to nullify the acquisition if the system isn't fully operational in 48 hours. 48 hours? I repeated. "That's our leverage window. We need to meet. How soon can you get to my office?" An hour later, I sat across from Diego in a small but neat office downtown. He'd laid out my contract on the desk between us, key sections highlighted. "They're claiming the addendum isn't valid because it wasn't included in subsequent promotion paperwork," he explained. "That's ridiculous. My role never fundamentally changed." Diego nodded. "They're grasping at straws. Now, let's talk strategy. What exactly do you want out of this?" I'd been pondering that question all morning. "Three things," I said finally. "Full credit for my work, fair compensation for the system I built, and—" I hesitated. "And?" Diego prompted. "And I want Phoebe exposed for what she did." Diego leaned back, studying me. "The first two are straightforward. The third is trickier. We can't make exposure a legal demand, but we can create circumstances where the truth comes out naturally," I suggested. A slow smile spread across Diego's face. "Now you're thinking like a lawyer. Let's draft our response." We spent the next 2 hours crafting a careful message. Not a list of demands, but an invitation to resolve the unfortunate situation in a way that benefited all parties. By the time we finished, the company had called 4 more times. "Ready?" Diego asked, finger hovering over the send button. I nodded, and with that simple motion, everything was set in motion. The response came within 15 minutes. A request for an immediate meeting with the board, including representatives from the parent company. They offered to send a car. "Too eager," Diego murmured. "They're panicking." "Good," I said. "Let's make them wait until tomorrow." "Playing hardball?" Diego raised an eyebrow. "I like it." We scheduled the meeting for 10 a.m. the next day, giving the company another night of uncertainty. Another night for Phoebe to dig herself deeper, trying to fix what she didn't understand. That evening, Leo called instead of texting. "They brought in external consultants," he said without greeting. 3 different teams. None of them can get past the authentication blocks. How's Phoebe handling it? I tried to keep my voice neutral. He lowered his voice. "She told the board she mentored you through building the entire system, that she designed the architecture and you just executed her vision." My grip tightened on the phone. Did they believe her? At first. But then the consultants started asking technical questions. It got awkward fast. I closed my eyes, picturing the scene. Phoebe stumbling through explanations of systems she'd never bothered to understand, her confidence faltering with each question. "There's something else," Leo continued. "The parent company rep asked to see all the development documentation with your signatures. Phoebe claimed you never properly documented anything." A harsh laugh escaped me. "She said what?" "Yeah." That's when Anthony looked really concerned. He asked about the repository. Phoebe said, "You must have deleted it before leaving." The repository that contained every detail of my work for the past 3 years, every decision, every breakthrough, every late night. The repository she had downloaded before firing me. "Leo, I need you to do something for me," I said carefully. "Can you check the access logs for the documentation repository? I need to know who accessed it in the past 2 weeks." "Already did," he replied, surprising me. "That's actually why I'm calling. Phoebe downloaded everything last Friday. I have the logs." My heart raced. "Can you forward them to me?" "Already did that too. Check your personal email." He paused. "Ivy, what she did to you was wrong. Most of the team knows it. After we hung up, I forwarded the logs to Diego with a simple message. More ammunition. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out my old sketchbook and paints, setting up by the window where the city lights provided a perfect backdrop. For hours, I lost myself in colors and shapes, creating something new instead of fixing someone else's problems. By morning, I felt centered in a way I hadn't in years. I chose my outfit carefully, not the standard business attire I'd worn at the company, but a deep green dress that made me feel confident, professional but distinctly me. Diego met me in the lobby of my former office building. "Remember?" he said quietly as we waited for the elevator. "Let me do most of the talking. When you do speak, focus on the technical aspects only. No emotions." I nodded, though containing my emotions would be the hardest part. As the elevator climbed, I silently rehearsed what I would and wouldn't say. The conference room fell silent when we entered. 8 people sat around the table. Anthony, our CEO, 3 board members, 2 representatives from the parent company, a woman I didn't recognize who had legal written all over her crisp suit, and Phoebe. Phoebe's expression flickered between surprise, anger, and something else, fear, before settling into a composed smile. "Ivy, thank you for coming in. We have some concerns about the system implementation that Ms. Carter will be addressing the technical aspects shortly." Diego interrupted smoothly. "But first, we need to clarify the terms of her involvement." He placed copies of my contract addendum on the table, along with printouts of the repository access logs. As each person reached for the documents, I finally allowed myself to look directly at Phoebe. Our eyes met. And in that moment, I saw the exact instant she realized what was happening. The precise second she understood that her carefully constructed narrative was about to collapse. And I knew exactly what I wanted my revenge to be. The boardroom air felt charged with tension. Anthony cleared his throat, glancing between the contract in his hands and Phoebe's increasingly rigid posture. "Before we begin," Diego said, "I'd like to establish some facts. Ms. Carter designed and built the integration system that forms the centerpiece of your recent acquisition. According to this addendum, which was properly executed and never superseded, she retains intellectual property rights until specific conditions are met." The company lawyer leaned forward. "This addendum was signed 3 years ago under different management. We contend that, if the signatures remain valid," Diego interrupted, "the company accepted the benefits of this agreement for years. You can't now claim it doesn't apply simply because it's inconvenient." One of the parent company representatives, a woman with silver-streaked hair and piercing eyes, tapped the access logs. "Could someone explain what these show?" Before anyone could respond, Phoebe jumped in. "Those are standard backup protocols. As project lead, I regularly archived system documentation. I couldn't help myself. At 11:42 p.m. on a Friday, while I was completing the final module, the room fell silent. The silver-haired woman turned to Phoebe. "You told us yesterday that Ms. Carter failed to properly document the system." Phoebe's voice faltered. There were gaps in her documentation that I was attempting to fill. Anthony's expression darkened. "That directly contradicts what you said in our emergency meeting. You claimed Ivy deleted documentation before leaving." "Perhaps I misspoke under pressure," Phoebe said, her smile strained. "The important issue is getting the system operational." "Indeed," said the silver-haired woman, turning to me. "Ms. Carter, can you resolve the authentication issues?" All eyes turned to me. This was the moment, my opportunity to explain exactly how Phoebe had betrayed me, how she'd stolen credit, how she'd humiliated me. The words bubbled up in my throat. Diego touched my arm lightly, a silent reminder of our strategy. I took a deep breath. "Yes, I can resolve the issues. The authentication protocol requires my biometric verification for major structural changes, a security feature to prevent unauthorized system modifications. That seems..." The company lawyer hesitated. "Unusual. It's documented in Section 27 of the Architecture Overview," I replied calmly. Which Phoebe approved last year? Phoebe's face flushed. I don't recall that specific you. Page 42, paragraph 3, I continued. Your initials appear in the approval column. The silver-haired woman leaned back, a glimmer of what might have been appreciation in her eyes. How quickly can you implement the necessary fixes, Ms. Carter? Diego stepped in. That depends on the terms of Ms. Carter's re-engagement. As her counsel, I must insist on proper recognition of her intellectual property rights, fair compensation, and appropriate credit for her work. Credit? Phoebe interjected. Ivy was part of my team. Teams don't get individual credit. Interesting perspective, Diego replied, sliding another document across the table. These are press clippings where you discussed your revolutionary system. No mention of teams there. Anthony ran a hand through his hair. Let's focus on solutions. Miss Carter, what would it take to get you back on board immediately? Diego and I exchanged glances. This was proceeding exactly as we'd anticipated. 3 conditions, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. First, proper compensation for my intellectual property. The system currently being implemented. Diego has prepared a fair valuation. Anthony nodded. And second, public acknowledgement of my role as creator and architect of the integration system in all company communications, press releases, and technical documentation going forward. Phoebe made a small noise of protest, but Anthony silenced her with a look. That seems reasonable, given the circumstances. And third, I met Phoebe's eyes directly. I will oversee the implementation personally, as Chief Technology Officer. The room erupted in murmurs. Phoebe stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. That's absurd. I'm the Chief Integration Officer. The system falls under my purview. The system you can't operate, the silver-haired woman said quietly. The system you claim to understand. Anthony looked pained. Phoebe, please sit down. Let's discuss this rationally. Anthony, there's nothing to discuss. Phoebe snapped. She's holding the company hostage. You can't reward that behavior. Diego smiled thinly. Miss Carter isn't holding anyone hostage. She's enforcing her contractual rights after being wrongfully terminated without the transition period her agreement requires. The silver-haired woman turned to Anthony. Our timeline doesn't allow for prolonged negotiations. If Ms. Carter can implement the system as promised, her terms seem reasonable considering the alternative. Anthony nodded slowly. I tend to agree. Ivy, if we meet these conditions, how soon can you begin? Immediately, I replied. The authentication issues can be resolved within hours. Full implementation would take approximately 2 weeks. 2 weeks? Phoebe laughed incredulously. I promised the board 3 days. You promised something you couldn't deliver, I said simply. The second parent company representative, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. Ms. Blake, yesterday you assured us you understood every aspect of this system. Now it appears you can't even access it without Ms. Carter's assistance. Can you explain this discrepancy? Phoebe's composure cracked visibly. I oversaw the entire project. The technical details were delegated, yet you presented yourself as the architect, he pressed. I was speaking in a managerial capacity, she insisted, her voice rising. Ivy worked under my direction. That's not how innovation works, the silver-haired woman said. Direction isn't creation. Anthony cleared his throat. I believe we need to make a decision quickly. I propose we accept Miss Carter's terms, with details to be finalized by end of day. Diego produced a preliminary agreement he'd prepared. We anticipated this outcome. The key terms are outlined here. As papers were passed around, Phoebe tried one last gambit. This is setting a dangerous precedent. What's to stop other employees from holding critical systems hostage? Perhaps, said the silver-haired woman. The precedent we should worry about is taking credit for other people's innovations. The meeting concluded 30 minutes later with a signed agreement. As people filed out, Phoebe lingered, waiting until we were alone in the conference room. You won't succeed, she said, her voice low. You're not a leader, Ivy. You're a coder. You don't have what it takes to navigate the politics at this level. I gathered my papers calmly. You taught me more about politics than you realize. This isn't over, she warned. Actually, it is. I met her gaze steadily. You fired me, Phoebe, in front of everyone, called me worthless. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences? She opened her mouth to respond, but I was already walking away. The next 2 weeks were among the most challenging of my career. I worked directly with the parent company implementation team, untangling the integration issues that had emerged. True to my word, I resolved the authentication problems within hours. But the full system implementation required meticulous attention. Phoebe attempted to insert herself into the process repeatedly, scheduling unnecessary review meetings and questioning my decisions in front of others. Each time, I responded with technical explanations so thorough that even attempting to follow them made her eyes glaze over. By the end of the first week, the parent company representatives had taken to coming directly to me with questions. By the middle of the second week, Phoebe's meetings were being rescheduled or canceled entirely. The board scheduled a company-wide announcement for Friday afternoon to formally introduce the new organizational structure. As I prepared for the meeting, Leo knocked on my temporary office door. "You did it," he said, grinning. "Everyone's talking about how you saved the acquisition. The system works," I replied modestly. "It just needed the right implementation approach." "It's more than that," Leo insisted. "Phoebe's been telling everyone for months that she designed the architecture. Now, everyone knows the truth." I paused in gathering my notes. "How's she handling that?" Leo's grin widened. "Not well. She tried to take credit for the successful implementation in yesterday's executive meeting. Anthony shut her down immediately. Said something about accurate attribution being essential to company integrity. I couldn't help but smile. Integrity. Imagine that. The company atrium was packed when I arrived for the announcement. Anthony stood at the podium, with board members and parent company executives seated behind him. Phoebe sat at the end of the row, her face a careful mask. "As you know," Anthony began, "the past 2 weeks have seen significant changes in our organization. The integration of our technologies with our new parent company represents an exciting opportunity for growth." And he continued with standard corporate optimism until reaching the personnel announcements. "I'm pleased to introduce our new executive team, who will lead us through this transition and beyond." One by one, executives were called forward, their new titles announced to polite applause. When Phoebe's name was called, I held my breath. Phoebe Blake will be transitioning to our client relations team, where her communication skills will strengthen our customer partnerships. Not fired, but demoted and sidelined. From the tight smile on Phoebe's face as she stood for a moment of awkward applause, this was unexpected news to her as well. And finally, Anthony continued, "I'm pleased to announce our new Chief Technology Officer, the architect of the integration system that brought us to this momentous juncture, Ivy Carter." The applause that greeted me as I walked to the podium was thunderous. From the development team, I heard actual cheering. As I scanned the crowd, I saw genuine smiles, nods of respect, and more than a few thumbs up from people who had witnessed my humiliation 2 weeks earlier. At the podium, I kept my remarks brief and forward-looking, focusing on the potential of our technology rather than the past. But as I concluded, I couldn't resist one final statement. Success in technology isn't about who speaks the loudest or who can best present an idea, I said, my eyes briefly meeting Phoebe's. It's about innovation, integrity, and the quiet persistence to build something that works exactly as promised. I look forward to leading a team where every contributor is valued for their actual contribution. The pointed message wasn't lost on the crowd. As applause erupted again, I saw Phoebe slip quietly out a side door. Later that evening, as I was packing up my new office, the corner space that had once been Phoebe's, Diego called with news. "The final compensation agreement came through," he said. 6 times your previous salary, plus stock options, and the implementation bonus we negotiated. And the public acknowledgement? The press release went out an hour ago. You're prominently featured as the architect and creator of the system. There's already interest from tech journals for interviews. I sat back in my chair now, and looked out at the city lights. Thank you, Diego, for everything. You did the hard part, he replied. You built something so valuable they couldn't ignore you. After hanging up, I pulled out my old company badge, the one Tom, the security guard, had awkwardly taken 2 weeks earlier. I'd found it in my new desk drawer with a sticky note. Thought you might want this back. T. The photo showed a younger version of me. Hair pulled back severely, expression serious. I hardly recognized that woman now. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your office looks good on you. Never doubted you'd find your way back. Tom. I smiled and began typing a response when an email notification appeared. From Phoebe, my finger hovered over the delete button, but curiosity won out. I opened it. Ivy, I underestimated you. A mistake I won't repeat. This company isn't big enough for both of us, and I won't be relegated to selling what you build. Enjoy your victory while it lasts. P. I read it twice, then calmly clicked delete. Her threats meant nothing now. The system she'd claimed as her own had exposed her. And her inability to understand what she'd taken credit for had been her undoing. No dramatic confrontation needed, no elaborate scheme, just the elegant justice of truth revealing itself. That was my revenge, not destroying Phoebe, but simply creating space for the truth to emerge. She had destroyed herself by believing she could claim credit for work she didn't understand. I turned off my computer and picked up my bag, ready to head home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new systems to build, new problems to solve. But tonight, I would sleep soundly, secure in the knowledge that I had reclaimed not just my work, but my worth. As I walked through the quiet office, I passed the empty desk that had been mine 2 weeks ago. The desk where Phoebe had stood over me and declared me worthless. I paused, running my fingers lightly across its surface. Thank you, I whispered to no one in particular, for showing me that the true measure of my value was never in someone else's hands. If you've ever had someone try to diminish your worth or take credit for your hard work, leave a comment below. And if this story of quiet persistence and truth prevailing resonated with you, hit that subscribe button. Because sometimes the most satisfying revenge isn't about bringing someone else down. It's about rising to exactly where you belong. The glass door to our quarterly meeting flew open with such force that the crash echoed through the atrium. Rain stormed in, her face twisted with rage, clutching printouts in her trembling hand. Stand up, she commanded, her voice cutting through the sudden silence. 200 employees froze mid-presentation. I rose slowly from my chair, confusion flooding my mind as all eyes turned to me. Is this your email address? She thrust the paper toward my face, her crimson nail tapping against the header. Yes, but did you send this yesterday at 4:32 p.m.? Her words sliced through my attempt to speak. An email containing our proprietary formulation for the $50 million government contract to our competitors? My stomach hollowed. No, I never. Liar! Rain slammed her hand onto the glass table. The sound reverberated through the atrium like a gunshot. How dare you betray us like this? Whispers erupted around me. Colleagues I'd worked alongside for 7 years inched away as if betrayal was contagious. I didn't send a... The evidence is right here. She waved the papers wildly. Your email, your access code, your betrayal. Security appeared at the doorway. Men I'd greeted every morning for years. Now they watched me with cold suspicion. 7 years, Rain continued, her voice rising to ensure everyone heard my public execution. 7 years we trusted you with our research. You pioneered our breakthrough plant growth formula, the one that helps crops withstand drought while remaining completely organic, the one that was going to change agriculture forever. And this is how you repay us? My heart hammered against my ribs. The agricultural biostimulant we'd developed was revolutionary. Farmers across drought-stricken regions could grow crops with minimal water while maintaining organic certification. It had been my life's work. Pack your desk. Rain's voice sliced through my thoughts. You'll never work in this industry again. The security guards moved toward me. 200 employees watched as I walked out, legs weak beneath me, too stunned to defend myself. At my desk, a guard handed me a cardboard box. 5 minutes, he said coldly. I mechanically gathered my personal belongings, the photo of my parents' farm, a ceramic mug from college, a few books, 7 years of work, and it all fit in one small box. As I reached for my coat, a hand touched my shoulder. I turned to find Wyatt, my lab assistant for the past 3 years, looking uncomfortable. I can't believe you did this, he whispered. Disappointment etched across his face. We were so close to changing agriculture forever. I didn't, I insisted, my voice breaking. Wyatt, you know me. His eyes darted to the security guards, then back to me. Everyone saw the evidence, Meredith. The use of my last name instead of Cora cut deeper than I expected. Wyatt stepped back, creating physical distance to match the emotional chasm that had instantly formed between us. Time's up, the guard announced, gesturing toward the exit. The walk through the office was excruciating. Faces I'd known for years, people I'd celebrated milestones with, solved problems with, built something meaningful with, all turned away. No one made eye contact, no one offered support. I was already erased. Outside, the bright spring sunshine felt like a mockery. Clutching my box, I watched the glass doors close behind me, cutting me off from everything I'd worked toward since graduate school. My phone buzzed with notifications. Your access has been revoked. Your email account has been suspended due to corporate espionage allegations. Direct deposit canceled by employer. In 20 minutes, my entire professional identity had been obliterated. I sat in my car, hands shaking too badly to insert the key. The truth hammered in my head. I knew exactly why this had happened, and it had nothing to do with leaking secrets to competitors. If you're feeling the sting of this injustice alongside me, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to hear how this story unfolds. Have you ever been wrongfully accused? Share your experience in the comments. Your story matters too. My name is Cora Meredith, and until 6 weeks ago, I was the lead agricultural researcher at Nature Growth Solutions, developing organic plant stimulants that could revolutionize farming in drought-affected regions. Now I'm about to tell you how everything I'd worked for was stolen from me in an instant, and what happened next. 6 months before my public firing, I'd discovered something alarming during routine quality testing. Our organic plant formulation had been subtly altered. Several key ingredients had been substituted with synthetic chemicals that mimicked growth patterns but were fundamentally different at the molecular level. These changes weren't immediately obvious unless you knew exactly what to look for. And as the lead researcher who developed the original formula, I did. These synthetic compounds could potentially contaminate groundwater and soil microbiomes. The $50 million government contract specifically required 100% organic composition, with strict environmental safety parameters. When I raised concerns privately with Rain, she brushed me off. The testing panels won't detect these compounds, she'd said, her voice casual as if discussing a minor packaging change. We save millions in production costs, and no one will ever know the difference. But it's not what we promised, I'd argued, and we don't have enough long-term data to know if... Are you questioning my decision? Her tone shifted instantly, eyes narrowing. Because I can always find researchers who understand how business works. I persisted, showing her my findings, explaining the potential environmental impact. The next day, my workspace was moved from the main lab to a smaller auxiliary space. The week after, I was excluded from strategy meetings I'd always attended. Projects were reassigned. Impossible deadlines appeared for trivial tasks. The message was clear: drop it or be pushed out. Instead, I started keeping alternative formulation samples at home, working nights to perfect a truly organic version that matched the performance of our current product. 3 days before my firing, I noticed my email had been accessed while I was at lunch. The next day, sensitive files were moved on my computer. Now, sitting in my car outside the building that had been my second home, I understood. Rain hadn't just fired me, she'd destroyed me. My reputation was shattered. No agricultural research facility would touch me with accusations of corporate espionage hanging over my head. What puzzled me was the email. I truly hadn't sent our formula to anyone, but denying it now would be pointless. Rain had made sure everyone believed I was guilty. I finally managed to start my car, As I pulled away from the parking lot, my phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? I answered. Is this Cora Meredith? A male voice asked. Yes. This is Trevor Wilson from Harvest Sciences. We received an interesting email from you yesterday, but our security flagged it before anyone could examine the contents. Given the sensitive nature, I wanted to speak with you directly. My heart stopped. I didn't send you any email. A pause. Well, it came from your address. Something about a government contract formulation? That wasn't me, I insisted, pulling over because my hands had started shaking again. Someone must have accessed my account. I see, Trevor said carefully. You should know that we've already alerted your company about this contact. We take intellectual property very seriously. Of course you did, I whispered, realizing Rain's claim hadn't been entirely fabricated. Someone had sent an email from my account. I just hadn't been the sender. For what it's worth, Trevor added, his voice softer. I thought it seemed out of character. We've met at several industry conferences, and you've always struck me as intensely principled. The call ended, and I sat staring at nothing. I'd been perfectly set up. Rain had manufactured my downfall while protecting her modified formula. I wish I could say I immediately plotted my revenge, that I drove away from Nature Growth Solutions with a master plan forming in my mind. The truth was much messier. I spent the first night sobbing in my bathroom, the second day frantically sending emails to contacts who never responded, and the third morning sick with anxiety before my first job interview. I didn't get that job, or the next one, or any of the 12 I applied for over the following 3 weeks. The agricultural research community was smaller than outsiders realized, and word had spread. I was toxic, untouchable. Former colleagues avoided me. Professional connections disappeared. One former mentor answered my call only to tell me he couldn't risk his reputation by being associated with me. With rent due and savings dwindling, I made the call I'd been avoiding. Mom, I need to come home for a while. My parents owned a small farm in western Nebraska, 110 acres of increasingly thirsty land that had been in our family for 3 generations. They'd scraped together enough money to send me to college, proud that their daughter would be the first Meredith with a PhD, never expecting I'd return in disgrace at 34. We're glad to have you home, my father said that evening at dinner, though the worry lines around his eyes told a different story. The farm was struggling. 3 years of insufficient rainfall had reduced yields dramatically. They didn't need another mouth to feed. It's temporary, I promised, though I had no idea how I'd rebuild my career. I'll help with the farm while I'm here. We could use it, my mother admitted. The eastern field barely produced anything last season. That night, staring at my childhood ceiling, an idea formed. I still had my alternative formulation samples, the truly organic versions I'd been developing in secret. I'd brought them with me, unable to abandon years of research even in my hasty departure. The next morning, I approached my father. Would you let me test something on a small section of the struggling field? He eyed me cautiously. What kind of test? The biostimulant I was developing. The real one, not the version my company perverted. It could help the soil retain moisture and strengthen the plant's root systems. And if it fails, we can't afford to lose any more yield. Just 5 acres, I pleaded. The worst section that barely produced last year. He agreed reluctantly. Over the next week, I applied my formula to the test section, carefully documenting every step. While waiting for results, I took odd jobs in town, helping at the local garden center, tutoring high school students in chemistry, anything to contribute to the household income. 3 weeks later, the difference was visible. My test section showed stronger seedlings, deeper green color, and better soil moisture retention than the rest of the field. My father stood at the edge of the plot, shaking his head in amazement. Whatever you did, it's working. For the first time since my firing, I felt a flicker of purpose. I still had my knowledge. My research wasn't entirely lost. But the victory was bittersweet. While I could help my parents' small farm, the contaminated formula from Nature Growth would soon be applied to thousands of acres across the country under the government contract. One evening, while helping my mother with dishes, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It's Wyatt. Got your number from old team roster. Gov inspection tomorrow. Rain is confident. Everyone's getting bonuses after contract signing next week. I nearly dropped a plate. Wyatt had reached out despite the risk to his position. The inspection, the final step before the contract would be officially signed, was happening already. "What's wrong?" my mother asked, noticing my expression. I couldn't burden her with the full truth, so I simplified. "My old company is about to secure a huge contract with a product that isn't what they claim it is." She dried her hands and sat at the kitchen table, gesturing for me to join her. "When your father's uncle sold diseased seed corn to the Andersons back in '78, it nearly bankrupted them. Your grandfather made him buy back every bushel, even though it meant taking a loan against the farm. He said integrity in agriculture isn't negotiable because everyone has to eat what we grow." That night, I stared at the darkness. Thousands of farms would use the contaminated formula on food crops. I'd tried contacting regulatory agencies after my firing, but without proof, they dismissed my claims as those of a disgruntled ex-employee. The next morning, I drove to the county library to use their computer, not wanting to leave search trails on my parents' home device. I researched the specific government testing protocols for the contract. The standard procedure involved analyzing samples provided by the company, then comparing them to random samples from production batches. But how could I, an outsider now, possibly affect this process? 2 days passed. Wyatt texted again. "Inspection went perfectly. Contract signing on Tuesday. Sorry things went bad for you." I felt physically ill. Tuesday. 4 days away. Once that contract was signed, the altered formula would spread across American farmland, with unknown environmental consequences. That evening, I walked the perimeter of our property, breathing in the scent of soil and growing things, trying to clear my head. My phone rang, another unknown number. "Is this Dr. Meredith?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes," I answered cautiously. "This is Leona Hayes with the Department of Agricultural Oversight. We're reviewing some testing protocols, and your name came up as the original developer of the Nature Growth drought-resistant biostimulant." My pulse quickened. "That's correct. Can you clarify something for me?" In the molecular binding process described in the patent, there's reference to a catalyst that seems inconsistent with the organic certification requirements. This was unexpected. The inspection had supposedly gone perfectly according to Wyatt, yet here was a government official asking very specific questions about potential inconsistencies. The original formula used an enzyme-based catalyst derived from mushroom mycelium. I explained carefully. "It's completely organic. If you're seeing something different, it would be a deviation from my research." "Interesting," Leona said. "Would you be willing to review some documentation for us? Strictly confidential, of course." "Absolutely," I agreed, hope flickering for the first time in weeks. "I'll send a secure link. We need your insights by tomorrow afternoon." After the call ended, I sat on the old wooden fence, mind racing. Had the inspection actually revealed problems? Was there still a chance to stop this? The secure files arrived an hour later. I stayed up until 3 a.m. analyzing them, then sent back a detailed report highlighting 7 specific discrepancies between the documentation and what a truly organic formula would show. The next morning, I checked my email hourly, but heard nothing. By evening, my hope was fading. I checked agricultural news feeds, expecting to see preparations for the contract announcement. Instead, nothing. Complete silence. The day before the scheduled contract signing, I woke to a text from Wyatt. "Emergency meeting called. Everyone on edge. No explanation given." Something was happening. I refreshed news sites repeatedly throughout the day, searching for any mention of Nature Growth or the government contract. At 4:17 p.m., the headline finally appeared. "Major biostimulant contract, suspended pending investigation." I stared at my phone screen, reading the headline over and over. My hands trembled. Suspended. Pending investigation. I called my parents into the kitchen and showed them the news alert. "What does this mean?" my father asked. "I'm not sure yet," I admitted, "but something's happening." Within hours, industry forums buzzed with speculation. Nature Growth stock dropped 12% before trading was temporarily halted. No official statement had been released from the company or government agencies. That night, another text from Wyatt. Complete chaos here. Rain locked in meetings with legal team. No one telling us anything. I barely slept, refreshing news sites hourly. The next morning, a new development. Government inspectors returned to nature growth facilities. By afternoon, local news stations showed footage of people in white hazard suits entering the production facility. The agricultural science community erupted with theories. Former colleagues started reaching out, cautiously at first, then with increasing urgency. "Cora, what's happening?" texted Phoebe from quality control. "Did you know about this?" asked Damien from the research division. I answered none of them. Whatever was unfolding needed to happen without my interference. 3 days after the contract suspension, Leona Hayes called again. "Dr. Meredith, we'd like you to come in for a formal interview regarding Nature Growth's formulation process." "Am I under investigation?" I asked carefully. "No," she replied. "You're being consulted as the original developer. We need your expertise." The following day, I sat in a sterile government office, explaining my original research to a panel of scientists and regulators. I described the organic enzyme processes, the natural mineral stabilizers, the mycorrhizal components that made the formula both effective and environmentally sound. "And when did the formula change?" a stern-faced regulator asked. "I noticed alterations approximately 6 months ago," I explained. "When I raised concerns internally, I was gradually isolated and eventually terminated." "On what grounds?" "Corporate espionage. I was accused of sending proprietary information to competitors." The panel exchanged glances. "Did you?" "No," I said firmly. "But someone used my email account to send something. I was never shown exactly what was sent." They nodded, making notes. The questioning continued for hours, exhaustive and detailed. When I finally emerged, the sun was setting. My phone buzzed with notifications. Nature Growth had released a statement. "We are cooperating fully with regulatory inquiries regarding our agricultural products. We maintain our commitment to quality and compliance." Corporate doublespeak that said nothing. A week passed. Then, too, the investigation continued behind closed doors. I focused on my parents' farm, expanding the test plot, documenting results. The eastern field was showing remarkable improvement, proof that my original formula worked perfectly without synthetic shortcuts. Then came the day that changed everything. I was harvesting early tomatoes from my mother's garden when Leona Hayes called again. "Dr. Meredith, the investigation has concluded. I thought you should hear the results before the public announcement." My heart raced. "What did you find?" "Systematic substitution of synthetic compounds for organic components, falsified testing data, and deliberate misrepresentation to government agencies." Her voice turned grimmer. "The environmental impact assessment shows potential groundwater contamination in test regions. Criminal charges are being filed against several executives, including Rain Blackwood." I sat down hard on the garden bench. Criminal charges? Fraud, environmental violations, conspiracy. The evidence is overwhelming. "What evidence?" I asked, genuinely curious. Even I hadn't managed to compile definitive proof before my termination. "That's actually why I'm calling." The comparison testing revealed something unusual. The verification samples, the ones earmarked for government testing, contained a marker compound not present in actual production batches. When exposed to our extended protocol conditions, it produced a distinctive crystalline pattern that made the substitutions immediately obvious. It was almost as if, she paused, as if someone wanted us to find the discrepancy, she finished. A moment of silence stretched between us. "The Board of Nature Growth has requested a meeting with you," Leona continued. "They're in crisis mode. The government contract is permanently canceled, their stock has collapsed, and they're facing class action lawsuits from shareholders. They specifically asked for you." "Why would they want to see me?" I asked, though I already knew. "They need the original formula, the one that actually works without shortcuts, the one you developed." 3 days later, I walked into Nature Growth headquarters for the first time since my humiliating exit. The atmosphere had transformed. Gone was the confident bustle of a successful biotech company. Instead, employees moved quickly with downcast eyes. Security guards looked nervous rather than intimidating. The receptionist, The same woman who had watched me leave with my cardboard box of belongings now stood to greet me. Dr. Meredith, they're waiting for you in the conference room. The board of directors, 8 people I'd rarely interacted with during my years at the company, sat around the table looking haggard. Notably absent was Rain. Dr. Meredith, the chairman began, thank you for coming. We find ourselves in an unprecedented situation. I said nothing, waiting. The actions taken by former CEO Blackwood were not authorized by this board. We had no knowledge of the formula alterations or the circumstances of your departure. I raised an eyebrow. You had no oversight of a $50 million government contract? Several members shifted uncomfortably. We trusted our executive team. Another board member offered weakly. Clearly that trust was misplaced. What do you want from me? I asked directly. We understand you continued your research independently, that you have a functional, truly organic formulation that meets or exceeds the performance metrics promised to clients. I nodded once. We want to license that formulation. Nature Growth needs to rebuild its reputation, and your work could be the foundation of that rebuilding. License, I repeated. No, that's not going to happen. Alarm flashed across their faces. We're prepared to offer substantial compensation. I don't want compensation, I interrupted. I want ownership. The room fell silent. Explain, the chairman finally said. I'll provide my formula and return as chief scientific officer, but only if we restructure the company entirely. I want 30% ownership. I want a board seat. And I want to establish a profit-sharing program with the small farms that use our products. That's unprecedented, one board member sputtered. So is having your entire executive team facing criminal charges, I countered. Your choice is simple. Truly rebuild with me, or watch everything collapse without me. 3 weeks of negotiations followed. In the end, I got what I wanted. Not because I was a brilliant negotiator, but because they had no alternatives. The agricultural community knew I was the mind behind the original breakthrough. Without me, Nature Growth was finished. 6 months later, I stood in a field watching farmers gather for our demonstration day. The company, renamed Restoration Botanicals, was launching its first product line under my leadership. The formulation was completely organic, extensively tested, and performed exactly as promised. Wyatt approached, now leading our field testing division. The results from the Nebraska trials are excellent. 37% yield increase in drought conditions. Good, I said, watching a farmer run soil through his fingers, explaining to his daughter how the microorganisms worked. Have we finalized the small farm subsidy program? Ready to launch next month. The board approved the full funding. I nodded, satisfaction warming me from within. What I'd built was better than revenge. It was redemption. Later that evening, as I prepared for a presentation to agricultural extension agents, a news alert popped up on my phone. Former Nature Growth CEO, sentenced in fraud case. The article detailed Rain's 5-year prison sentence and lifetime ban from executive positions in publicly traded companies. The judge had been particularly harsh given the environmental implications of her actions. Standing alone in my office, the same corner office Rain once occupied, I finally allowed myself to remember the one piece of the story I had never shared with anyone. Not with the investigators, not with the board, not even with Wyatt. 1 week after my public firing, when Rain's face turned pale as government agents in hazard suits entered our production facility, she never knew what I'd actually sent in that leaked email. In my final hours clearing my desk, with security watching my every move, I'd meticulously swapped the samples earmarked for the government's verification testing. I replaced them with my alternative organic formula that contained a special twist, a molecular marker that would remain dormant under standard testing but would produce a distinctive pattern under the specific conditions of the government's extended verification protocol. This marker would reveal the presence of synthetic compounds in the actual production samples, when the government inevitably compared the verification samples to randomly selected production batches. The email Rain accused me of sending to competitors, it was actually sent by her son, or someone acting on her orders, from my account, but they never bothered to check what was attached. They assumed it contained our proprietary formula, when in reality, I'd prepared for this possibility. The attachment contained harmless, publicly available research papers with hidden metadata that would lead astute investigators to question specific aspects of the testing protocol. It was insurance I'd created but never expected to use. My true revenge wasn't in destruction. It was in building something better from the ashes of what Rain had tried to burn. Where she had sought shortcuts for profit, I created sustainable solutions. Where she had fostered fear, I built collaboration. The company that once cast me out now thrived under my guidance, helping the very farmers she would have endangered. Sometimes the most satisfying revenge isn't watching your enemy fall, it's watching your vision rise. If you've ever faced injustice or betrayal in your professional life, I hope this story reminds you that your knowledge and integrity can't be taken from you. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to rebuild after a professional setback? And if you found this story meaningful, please like and subscribe for more stories of resilience and redemption in unexpected places.